I'm going to show you how to paint a really simple Christmas card. Let's get started. I'm just using 300 grams watercolour paper. I'm folding in half and it's about 5 by 7 inches. And I'm going to paint these baubles in a landscape format. And I'm just using some of my washi tape to draw around, and I'm using different size circles as well. And I'm just drawing the sort of clasp at the top. I'm using an HB pencil. So it's a really simple idea here, just circles, and you can sort of arrange them however you want. I'm actually using my imagination to decorate and to paint the baubles. And that's what I like about this sort of thing. It's so much fun. So I'm using a ruler to actually draw a straight line for the string. And I'll decorate this later as well. So I'm ready to paint my baubles. I'm using a wax crayon to apply to the same area of each bauble, keeping the light source consistent to create a highlight on the bauble. You could paint around this highlight, or you could use masking fluid to mask it, or white paint at the end of the painting. I'm using Daniel Smith's Rose of Ultramarine. I just love this colour. It's got a sort of a pinky sort of shade with the ultramarine sort of coming through as it starts to dry. And it's just the most stunning colour. One of my favourite Daniel Smith colours. Now, if you don't have this colour, don't worry. You could actually mix ultramarine with alizarin crimson or permanent rose. So I'm painting this wet on dry. The left hand side of the bauble is where the light is coming from. So the right hand side will be darker. So I'm actually going to add thicker, darker paint. Literally paint straight from the tube. So I'm just painting carefully around the edge here, wet on dry, using my size 8 round brush. What I'm doing now is I'm just dropping some water into the damp paint, and that might create quite a nice cauliflower or back run on the bauble to create some lovely texture. I'm adding now quite creamy Rose of Ultramarine with my size 8 brush, damp into damp. So this is the dark side of the bauble. Still keeping the transparency so it gives the impression of a glass bauble. And to create some more interesting textures, I'm adding a pinch of table salt to the wet surface. And what that'll do, it'll absorb the salt to create some lovely, light, interesting textures. So it's quite a nice way, this, of trying out different colours, different textures, different techniques even, and just have fun with it. So I'm using the Rose of Ultramarine again, painting wet on dry. Lots of water on the left hand side, and again on the right hand side slightly darker paint, so less water, more paint. I'm using ultramarine here, and I'm going to actually add some Lunar black to it later to create a darker wash. You can use any blue, any black, or even Paynes grey. Painting this wet on dry, and you can see how the wax is resisting the paint to create that light highlight. So again, starting off with a light wash to begin with, adding some more ultramarine now, less water on the right hand side, letting that sort of run into the wet paint, and it'll create some lovely sort of textures and effects there. One of the wonderful things about watercolour is the transparency, and painting these glass baubles gives the look of glass because you can sort of see the white of the paper coming through, and you can really just play around with the different sort of watercolour effect. This ultramarine granulates beautifully, creating some wonderful textures as well. I just love creating texture in watercolour. And here's a close-up here. You can see all that lovely granulation on the ultramarine there. So I'm adding the Lunar black mixed with the ultramarine. Lunar black also creates a lot of granulation, but you could use Paynes grey or even black. I'm just dropping in some water now on the left hand side, and again that may cause a cauliflower or a back run, and that happens when you put wet paint into damp paint or drying paint. I'm using Daniel Smith's Iridescent Aztec Gold. If you don't have this colour, don't worry. You could use quinacridone gold or raw sienna, because I'm going to add a little bit of glitter to this later once the baubles have dried. So I'm just painting this wet on dry, and it's got a beautiful texture here as well, and a little shimmer if you hold it up to the light. So I'm just carefully painting to the edge here using the tip of my size 8 brush. So I'm getting a little bit of that rose of ultramarine there and some of the ultramarine blue with a pinch of the black, just using the previous colours, painting damp into damp on the right hand side and then dropping in some water there, top left, and just seeing what happens, sort of really playing around with the paint here, and you can see it all kind of separates and creates some wonderful colours and textures. I'm just adding a little bit of the Lunar black mixed with the ultramarine here, damp into wet on the right hand side where it's darkest. Going back in with that iridescent gold and just dropping that in to that dark there just to smooth things out. So painting this small bauble to the bottom left, wet on dry, using that iridescent Aztec gold, and then dropping in a little bit of the rose of ultramarine and Lunar black. I've got quite a lot of paint on here, so it's quite creamy, so I may dilute this a little. So just painting carefully to the edge there, this slightly stronger, darker colour. Swiping my brush into the black and the ultramarine there and painting damp into damp, adding a little bit more of the rose of ultramarine, painting it just above that dark there, damp into damp, rinsing my brush and just sort of lifting off a little bit to create some more light on the top of the bauble, and then dropping in some water there, hopefully to create some interesting cauliflowers. So I've decided to paint the large bauble with Winsor red. I love this colour and I thought it'd really stand out and be the star of the show. So starting off on the left hand side, dropping in some water there to create lots of light washes and just playing with the paint, working my way round, adding a little bit more of the red now. And just to let you know that the pans that I'm using are freshly, well, not quite freshly, but they are tube paint squeezed into the pans. So you get lots of paint there. I really like this process of watercolour painting. So I'm just painting to the edge here using the tip of my size 8 brush. I'm just lifting off some paint here. It's actually a puddle, but it creates the look of reflective light here on the gold bauble. Going back to the red bauble here, adding some of the rose of ultramarine with ultramarine, damp into damp, and adding a touch of the Lunar black as well to create the shadow. Adding a touch more of the Winsor red, damp into damp. I didn't want to lose that lovely red colour, and just sort of painting around the sort of bottom right hand side. I'm just adding a little bit of cadmium yellow here on the left hand side and a touch more of the Winsor red. I wanted to create some warmth there. And I'm just lifting off some paint now with a clean damp brush to create the reflective light at the bottom of the bauble. So painting my last bauble now with the ultramarine wet on dry using my size 8 brush. So I'm just painting the sort of brass clasps at the top of the baubles using the iridescent gold. You could use quinacridone gold or raw sienna. Wet on dry with my size 8 brush. I think I should have used a smaller brush actually, but I haven't actually let the baubles dry, but you can do so. I want maybe some of that gold paint to run into the top of the bauble. I just thought it might create some interesting effects there as well. So this is quite a loose painting. So I'm adding a little bit of black to that iridescent gold just to create some darks there on the brass, wet into wet with my size 8 brush. I did this upside down to make sure that I got access to them rather than painting over the damp baubles. So I'm sprinkling some salt on to the baubles. I'll allow the salt to dry naturally. And I'm just lifting off some of the reflective light with a clean damp brush there just to make the baubles look a little bit more 3D. And I'm going to allow my painting to dry naturally to allow the salt to work. I've brushed off the salt and you can see it's created the most amazing textures, especially on that red bauble. I'm just using a black fine liner pen, it's waterproof, and I'm drawing onto the dried watercolour. Only sort of sketching here and there. I'm not sort of sketching all the way around the bauble. It's just to bring them out a little bit more. You can do a little bit more detail with the pen, or you don't have to use the pen at all. I just thought it'd be quite nice. I'm so pleased with all the backgrounds and textures, etc. Now you could leave your Christmas card here and say it's finished, but I've decided to do a little bit of decoration with some glitter and PVA glue. So I'm using a synthetic brush here and I'm just applying the glue carefully over the top of the string here and also to the surface of the baubles just here and there. And I'm just using some gold glitter, and I'm using a dry brush actually just to apply it on to the baubles, just to sort of aim it a little bit better, especially on the string parts there. So just liberally sort of sprinkle your glitter on, and don't worry about all the loose bits because we're going to remove those by tapping the card. So here is the finished card. All the glitter is stuck quite nicely to the baubles and the string to finish off this Christmas card. I've really enjoyed it and I hope you're inspired to paint something similar. If you'd like to support the content that I create here on YouTube, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about the membership can be found in the description below, but you'll get access to my weekly exclusive tutorials and downloadable outline sketches, and you can cancel anytime. Thank you so much for watching. Happy Christmas card painting. Bye for now.